Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I appreciate you being with me. It's already started out to be a really good week. All right. Again, thank you so much for being with me. We're examining Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, and Jesus' prediction that immediately after the tribulation of those days, the days that he has just been describing, the days associated with the abomination of desolation, which would be set up in Judea, and it would be witnessed by his apostles. And at that time, there would be great tribulation. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun would be darkened, the moon would not give its light, the stars of heaven would fall from the sky, etc., etc. Then he said, all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. As I've been sharing with you, that's a direct citation of Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 10, which is absolutely, unequivocally posited at the time of the judgment of Old Covenant Israel. Now let me reiterate yesterday's video, all right? These are promises made to Old Covenant Israel. If, therefore, these promises are not fulfilled, then God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel remain valid, and that means that the old law, the law of Moses, remains valid, and that Old Covenant Israel remains God's covenant people. Now look, on Facebook constantly, people say, oh, the law of Moses passed away at the cross. Well, if the law of Moses passed away at the cross, then Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 10 was fulfilled at the cross. That means the destruction of Jerusalem happened at the cross, because Zechariah 12 verse 10 and the time of the mourning is posited firmly in that day when 2/3 of the people would perish out of the land and only a remnant would be saved. It is posited firmly at the time in which the Lord your God shall come and the city shall be taken. Zechariah chapter 14, pardon me, 1 through 5. Well, this is all confirmed when we turn to Revelation chapter 1. Listen, Revelation chapter 1 begins by telling us something very important. And you know, it's absolutely incredible. It's so sad to witness the utter desperation of former preterists who jump up and tell us, almost for the first time in history, almost, not quite, and they tell us there's not one legitimate time statement in the New Testament about the nearness of the coming of the Lord, the nearness, the true imminence of the end of the age. Remember what Mr. Lance Conley told us in his book. Time statements of imminence, when they're used of non-prophetic, non-eschatological events, they indicate genuine imminence. But when words of imminence are used with prophecy, pardon me, eschatology, they don't mean imminent. Now, I've pointed out before, Mr. Conley doesn't give a shred of proof for that. He doesn't cite a single lexicon to prove that. He just simply asserts it. Oh, by the way, he turned around and did a flip-flop, as my videos have demonstrated. He actually admitted that there are places in the New Testament, Matthew 10:23, Matthew 16:27, that did indicate that could have, he gave us 3 or 4 choices, but one of the choices for the time of fulfillment was AD 70. Well, if it was AD 70, then that means the time statement of Matthew 16:27, 28, a prophecy used the time language of imminence objectively. And thus, once again, Mr. Conley's entire paradigm falls. Well, look with me at Revelation 1 and verse 7, Revelation 1, 1 and 3. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God the Father gave to him to show to his servants things which must shortly take place. Listen to me, folks. Shortly take place doesn't mean 3,000, 2,000, or 1,000 years later. Shortly come to pass does not entail 100 years. It doesn't entail 500 years. And he sent and signified it by his angels to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw. All things that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keeps those things which are written in it, for the time is near. Now listen, the time for the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies was not near in the Old Testament. Over and over in the Old Testament, we are told that the eschatological prophecies were not near. But now we have arrived when John wrote Revelation, at a time when those prophecies and the fulfillment of those prophecies was near. So in the Old Testament, not near. New Testament, time is near. And these things must shortly come to pass. You know, were it not for the preconceived ideas about Jesus coming out of heaven in a physical body, riding a literal cumulus cloud, with the sound of some kind of a literal trumpet, in flaming fire, to destroy heaven and earth. Oh, wait a minute. Some of them say, well, you know, there's not really burned up. It's not really destroyed. It's renovated. But you get the point. Were it not for the preconceived ideas about the nature of the coming of the Lord, no one would argue with these time statements about when those things were to take place. If we had the Hebraic worldview of the nature of apocalyptic language, which I shared with you over several videos, no one would have taken the language of the coming of the Lord on the clouds of heaven with the angels in flaming fire. No one would have taken that language literally. But when the church was Hellenized and lost contact with the Hebraic roots, the Hebraic nature of apocalyptic language, all of a sudden, we've got to expect the coming of Jesus as a 5'5" Jewish man riding on a cumulus cloud out of heaven at the so-called end of time. And so our entire hermeneutic is skewed, distorted, and perverted. And we come to Revelation 1 and verse 7. Behold, he comes with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, even those who pierced him, and they shall mourn because of him. And we say, well, I know it said the time was at hand. I know it says that the time was near. I know it says those things must shortly take place, but it didn't take place. That is allowing theology to define words. Instead of allowing words and word definitions to define and to create theology, we start, what's the old saying in science? Make sure that your evidence fits your conclusion. Instead of saying make sure your conclusion fits your evidence, you got to make sure your evidence fits your conclusion. And that's what happens with people when they come to Revelation 1 through 3 and Revelation 1:7. Their conclusion is Jesus is coming back as a physical man at the end of time. Therefore, I've got to make these things must shortly come to pass, and the time is near, I've got to make those statements fit that conclusion. Oh, here's what I'll do. I will deny shortly come to pass means imminent. I will make the time is near to mean something vague, nebulous, almost metaphysical, into saying, oh, well, God's always near us. No, this says the time. Kairos, the appointed time. The appointed time for what? For the fulfillment of the things being foretold. The divinely appointed time was near when John wrote. Now what that means is, no matter what our concept of the nature of the coming on the clouds, since the evidence is overwhelmingly clear that these things must shortly come to pass because the time is near, we've got to bring our concept of the nature into harmony with the evidence that demands that it was coming soon, shortly, quickly, and it was about to take place. And we'll drive that home on the flip side. So I'll see you there.